Hello, everyone's Forest Focus. What a start to the season it's been for Nottingham Forest, seventh in the Premier League after 2 years of struggle following promotion. So what's changed and will this continue for years to come? Joining me to discuss all that and more is the iPaper's chief football writer, Reds fan Daniel Storey. Daniel, good to have you with us again. How are you today?
I'm very well. I feel like I've been a pessimistic voice on this podcast whenever I've appeared over the last couple of years. So yeah, I'm happy to report I'm well and giddy.
Yes, we'll get into that certainly. I mean, last time you were on, you were optimistic, I recall. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts now. Before we started recording, I was asking you about how your tour of the 92 clubs is going. Your mad idea for work. Was it your idea actually or not?
Yeah, it was definitely my idea.
How's it going?
Visiting a game and then writing a feature on each of the 92 clubs this season. As we record, I was at Stevenage last night, so 31 down out of 92. So I'm on track.
What have you learned from it? I saw recently you've been to Reading and Wimbledon, clubs with contrasting fortunes and some difficult journeys. Have you learned anything from any of the particular clubs?
Yeah, that's kind of it really. That every one you visit, no matter how big or small, there always seems to be at least like 20 or 25 clubs in the country where something mad is happening. And I know, as you get close to a club like we are with Forest, you sort of see all that. It's not until you visit for a day that sometimes you realise just how much kind of mania is going on behind the scenes everywhere.
Are Reading going to be all right? This obviously we'll get into Forest in a sec, but I do worry for them as a community club.
They're in another period of exclusivity with a potential buyer, but we don't really know who that buyer is yet. So, I'm worried for them. I really am. They need to get. They basically made some decent money out of Michael Elise joining Bayern Munich from Palace, which has kept them going for a bit. But yeah, they need some cash pretty quickly.
I suppose we refer to them, or a community club at the heart of the community. Forest are that as well. And there's been some rough times, but these are good times. What's your just general thoughts on what we're witnessing, and then we'll get into what's changed?
I mean, it's joyous. It's absolutely, completely joyous. It feels the best way I can describe it is that performance at Leicester felt like a team of Ryan Yates's, which is what we've all been chanting, and that's what that's what we want. We all want really high quality players who we can believe care half as much as we do, right? And Ryan has become one of those over the last 2 years in terms of his quality, and now it feels like everybody has that drive in the team. We don't seem to be carrying anybody anymore, or there's nobody there who you think maybe he doesn't quite fancy it. Maybe he's half looking to his agent to work out where he goes next, or looking for the next transfer window or the next international break. There's none of that. Like they look as if they love playing for Nottingham Forest, and that's the best thing.
So what I wrote down in my notes cheesy acronyms, because I've been going around senior schools because my daughter starts next year. So I've done tours, and they all seem to build their ethos around 3 P's, 4 D's. One had 6 C's, I think. So I wrote down a couple for Forest, which I think are kind of key to what's changed. You touched on one of them there. I wrote down character or culture, and Ryan Yates kind of typifies it. But like you say, it's permeated through the whole club. And he was on here and he spoke about trying to get raise standards himself. I know we've had this for a while. It goes back to, Gary Brazil and Steve Cooper, I think, started it. Having a good bunch of blokes does help, but to filter it through the entire squad, not just team, feels like one of the big factors in what we're seeing.
Absolutely. I kind of look for little moments or little exemplifiers of where that culture comes from. And one of them is a very small thing, but that huddle they do in away games, and they do it right by the away fans, and it gets everybody going. And it suggests to me that part of that is calculated, and it's like, how can we squeeze more out of every performance? How can we use the fans to help us and us to help them have a better time? And part of it is a kind of subconscious, we are greater when we are all together. And that's something that's not always been the case during our time in the Premier League, and certainly for the 2-3 decades before that. The club feels as united as I've ever known it. It was incredible under Steve Cooper at periods in the Premier League. It certainly was on that march to promotion. But to do it gets harder to do as the opponents you play are harder, and the chance of you losing games are greater. It becomes harder to do that, and it becomes more important. And they seem to have captured it superbly. And I think it probably kind of peaked at Leicester. I know it won't be our hardest away game this season. I know Liverpool was a more impressive result. But over the last 2 games, the best way I can say it is over the last 2 games, I've watched Forest with a 1 and 2-goal lead against Leicester, but with a 1-goal lead at home to Palace, with a 2-1 lead, having already ceded a lead against Leicester. And I wasn't completely angst-ridden that we were not going to win the game. I actually believed that we might win and hold on to a lead, which I can barely even remember happening before.
You said at the start, I think, you've been critical and questioning in years gone by of things, which kind of makes your voice carry a bit more weight, I think, when things are good. So what do you think's changed? I've made a few more notes, but what are your thoughts on what's got us to this place now?
I think 2 things over the summer were bigger drivers than anything else. The first was the quick decision that Nuno was going to stay, both on his part and the club's. On this podcast, I said I wanted him to stay. I know that wasn't a universal thing, but I wanted him to stay if he wanted to. I didn't want either party just to do it for its own sake. And what we've seen is that exactly what we hoped for, which is that Nuno is a manager and a coach who is dependent upon his organisation, and he feels that organisation improves the longer he has with players. And he got a pre-season, a full pre-season with the players. And we look completely different as a result of that in terms of our defensive organisation, in terms of our transitions from soaking up pressure to embarking upon counter-attacks. All of it looks better. And I also think that the signing of Nikola Milenkovic, this is nothing new I'm saying here, but has been absolutely revelatory, both for the defenders around him, both for the goalkeeper behind him, and also for those central midfielders who I think last season struggled to be everymen in midfield. They were having to protect the defence. They were having to be alert at defensive set pieces because everybody else wasn't. And then they're also tasked with kind of sparking counterattacks. And I think now, because of Milenkovic in there, they're able to be a little bit more forward facing. Yes, you still see like the tackles and the interceptions and the Yatesy work, but even he is looking to push forward when he gets the ball now. It's not, oh God, we finally got the ball, let's everybody take a breather and work out what we're doing and get pressed. So I think, those 2 things in tandem have been everything.
Do you think, with there's a bit of hindsight in this, do you think Nuno in a way was actually a really good fit for where Forest are and where they're going after Cooper? Because a lot of the attention was on Cooper. And there's a lot of kind of noise around Forest. We'll get onto that around the fines and stuff. But Nuno's actually quite the calming influence that fits in well. And you can kind of build around him without him attracting headlines. I know he's getting them now and getting deserved plaudits, but it feels like he's probably the right fit for where we are as a football club now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, you're right. There's an element of hindsight there, and there were points, right up until the Palace home win, where I was seriously concerned about the home form and the ability to break down teams at home, because that's where my fear was that the away form was more likely to run out than the home form was likely to change. And hopefully, and it seems I've been proven wrong on that, and I'm delighted by that. But yes, in terms of his personality and even on a practical basis, his business relationships with an agent that we've used for transfer dealings over the last couple of years, I think that probably gained him more sway in terms of being able to manage the squad over the summer, in terms of the transfers coming in. It's no surprise that when everybody seems to be on the same page, when you're not buying players for different people within the same club, that everything suddenly feels more settled. I think it's really interesting that summer 2023, Forest signed 10 permanent players and it felt really chaotic. Summer 2024, Forest signed 9 players permanently and it hasn't felt as chaotic. That's partly because 2 or 3 of them have gone out on loan to Olympiacos, or 2 of them have, and the right back is one for the future. But it's also because it felt like we were buying players to fit problems rather than just buying players. And that's been transformative too.
Yeah, one of the things I'd written down was continuity, obviously in the manager's office, but also in terms of recruitment. There was actually the base of an okay squad there with the underlying numbers defensively. It was just the set pieces that killed us. But I think, targeted recruitment has been essential. Obviously, you mentioned Milenkovic, but it's also Elliot Anderson, I think, is one as well, isn't he? And you can combine that with growth in players, and there's like Yates is one, but like Matt Sells as well, just in terms of performance. It feels like the right combination, I guess.
Yeah, and this is not a coincidence. Players, every Premier League player has a quality that will enable him to shine within games and therefore within entire seasons if everything goes right in terms of form and fitness. What they crave is a working environment in which they feel respected, in which they feel like they are educated of what the plan is for them as a player and of the team as a whole, and that they feel like the club is working together for them to get the best out of themselves and each other. And I think this is certainly the time that it's most felt like that at Forest since we came up. And therefore you see those players, you sign Matt Sells in January and he's thrown into a team because we don't rate the other goalkeepers we've got. And you say, we can't really defend set pieces, Matt. We make individual errors in open play. Now we need you to go and keep us up. And he doesn't play perfectly and he makes mistakes. And you kind of think, well, yeah, of course he does. Immediately, you then have a full pre-season with him. And immediately, you get greater defensive protection around him. And suddenly it makes him look better because the saves he's making, he's not having to make 7 or 8 a game now. But the saves he's making when he's called upon have been fantastic and have been point blank at some points. And it's the same point. Every goalkeeper is capable of making fantastic saves. It's about confidence. It's about believing that you're not going to have to do everything to keep your team in a game, and they all knit together. And yeah, I mean, on your point on Elliot Anderson, yeah, he has also been fantastic. I couldn't believe if you'd have said to me 2 months ago that there might be an argument that Morgan Gibbs-White is Forest's most important player, and now I think Milenkovic is, and that's not that's nothing about Morgan's injury or about winning without him. That's just about everybody else raising the standards, and it's a joy.
On Monday, we discussed about. I've probably been premature. I said I thought Anderson would be in the next England squad. You cover England games. You'll see more of them. Could it happen with Mainoo's injury or not?
There is something around England cementing him because there was interest from Scotland, and he has under 21 caps, which can mean something, but don't have to mean everything. And Scotland would still have liked to have him in. As I understand it, and from reports in the media. That has now been cemented that England, he's going to commit to England. I don't know if that means he's in the next squad, but it certainly means that pathway that exists, he scored for the 21s last time out, albeit in a very emphatic win, but he's clearly within that structure now. That means if he keeps playing as he is, he's got a chance. He's also completely multifunctional as a midfielder. And I think that is the new age of midfielders in general, and certainly English midfielders, where you could potentially put them in 3 or 4 different positions. Phil Foden and Cole Palmer are great examples of that. They just kind of make it happen wherever they play. And Anderson's another, because he can play the 10. He can dribble past 6 players against Palace and make everyone look silly. He can win the ball deep. He can pass progressively. He can carry the ball. He can kind of do the lot, and doesn't seem to need time to settle in each position when he's moved, even in the space of the same game. And managers at club level and international level absolutely love that.
Yeah, I'm getting way ahead of myself now, even more so, but he's perfect for tournament football as well. When you've got a squad and, you need to take 25 players. We'll come on to that as well for something else. Just lastly, the last of my cheesy words beginning with C that I written down was confidence. Lewis spoke about it after the win against Leicester around Chris Wood. But just in general, we had quite favourable fixtures to start with, and we used them well. And then I guess was the win at Anfield a big catalyst as well for what we're seeing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even in basic terms, you look at the results from last season. This season we've won away at 2 promoted clubs, which we did last season. We've beaten. This season we've beaten Palace at home and drawn with and lost to Fulham. Last season we beat Fulham at home and drew with Palace. There are some similarities. We won at Chelsea last season and drew this season. The Liverpool result, and to be honest, I think the Brighton performance / result were the 2 game changers for me, where not only could we take points away from home, but we could do it in a non-fluky way, because let's be honest, there were times when we won away under Steve Cooper that it was a kind of deliberate backs to the wall stuff, and that was our strategy, and it worked at times. And then to go to Brighton to play really well and take the lead, and then have one of those periods that we've had ever since we've come up, which is everybody slightly loses their heads and we concede 1 or 2 or 3 goals pretty quickly. To have one of those and then still be the ones trying to take the game to Brighton, both before and after a red card, was, yeah, I think that in terms of the confidence in the squad, it was like, hang on, there's nothing to fear here. I think there was fear in that squad when they went away to big clubs at times before this season, under Nuno and under Steve Cooper. I think, yeah, what started at Newcastle last season with an emphatic win that we could take the game to people away from home, albeit by soaking up pressure and hitting them on the counter, has now evolved into something very, very dangerous that almost makes the name of the opponent when we go away not really matter, because I think we'll play the same way, whatever.
I gave Dan a little bit of homework to go away and think about before we recorded. We'll come to that in 26 seconds, just on the other side of this advert for the Rick Parfitt gig on the 22nd of December at the Trent Navigation. Tickets on sale now from gigantic.com for Rick Parfitt Jr.'s gig on Sunday, the 22nd of December. I asked, one of the things I put in our notes was, if you were picking an all Premier League squad right now, a 25-man squad for a mythical tournament against the other leagues, would any Forest player be in it? I guess there'd be an element of form as well as ability in that, but deep down, could you pick any Forest player?
The honest answer is I don't think you would, but that sounds negative, so I'm going to caveat it in several ways. Firstly, if I was picking a 25-man squad and the tournament was being held like the Umbro Cup at the City Ground in front of Forest fans, then Ryan Yates would be in it, because he is a difference maker in terms of personality. Secondly, Morgan GibbsWhite is an obvious shout for being in that sort of setup. He's the only one at the moment who's in the England squad. And then, therefore, if you add all of the foreign players in the Premier League, you kind of understand how hard it is to break into a 25-man squad like that. So, no, I don't think we would. But I'd say that's absolutely fine. I think when Forest came up, and maybe even, I don't know Evangelos Marinakis' mind, but I suspect there have been times over the last 2 years where if you asked the club that question, or people within the club's hierarchy that question, they would have liked the answer to be yes. And therefore they would have liked to sign a player who would be that flagship. He would get in a 25-man squad. I don't think I think they see the value in not caring about that as much now, which is music to my ears, because you don't overachieve in the Premier League by having individual stars. You overachieve initially in the Premier League by having a group of players, managers, staff, fans who kind of believe in the goal and believe in each other. And I think we've got that now. And it doesn't bother me that they don't get in a 25-man squad. I think GibbsWhite, I think Milenkovic on form. And I think if you were picking a kind of fantasy squad, then, and this was an elite squad, then I think Murillo would probably be pretty high because of the kind of qualities he has. He's not flawless and he's still growing, but he has those attributes that, elite international squads like. Other than that, no, but that's fine. That's absolutely fine. There's a reason that these players are at Forest, and that's because we were promoted club 3 years ago. We were 16th in the Championship. It will take time for us to grow in that, but I think for the first time we are kind of growing that sustainably, which is all I ever wanted.
The only one I was thinking really was Chris Wood. Statistically, there's the well-known stat, we all seem to know it now, about only Palmer and Haaland have scored more goals since Nuno came in. Just on form, I think he's right up there at the moment. But strikers in the Premier League, there's not that many amazing ones, really. Obviously, there's Haaland. I really like Ollie Watkins. And then after that, there's quite a much for muchness. But it feels to me like Chris Wood on merit is, up there with the best. Right, I don't expect it to continue necessarily. He's overperforming his stats massively, but he's done that all the time under Nuno. So yeah, he's fantastic. Also, it looks like he's going to sign a 2-year contract extension. Does that just make sense? I know clubs don't normally give out contracts that long for his age, but does it fit with the style of player that he is?
Yeah, I mean, my ideal would have been a one. So it's going to be a 2.5-year deal, it sounds like, because it's going to be awarded in January. So my ideal would have been a 1.5 year with a pay rise rather than 2.5 years. But having said that, Chris will have more offers and more interested parties than he did 2 months ago or 3 months ago because of the form he's in. And therefore, if it means that makes him his decision to sign, then I don't think we can have too many complaints about it. Yes, there's clearly a worry that between the ages of 34 and 35, he doesn't quite offer enough. And Forest have had that with strikers before. But he's in the form of his life, quite frankly. So, and he's, he isn't relying upon, he's relying upon a clever movement. He's relying upon taking his shots really early. So keepers aren't set. I think we've seen that certainly with the first Leicester goal and certainly with the Palace goal. His ability to take shots early and put them into the corner is alluring at the moment. And they don't seem, other than the work rate off the ball, they don't seem to be attributes that necessarily will decline quickly. But yeah, 34 to 35 is a gamble, but it's a gamble worth taking given what we've seen this season.
The other one's Ole Gunnar, who sounds like he's in talks. Sort of. I don't know if we signed him as a punt or if we signed him as something we'd seen in numbers and eye tests and all that kind of stuff. I hope it was the latter, because it feels like he's indicative of a much improved recruitment policy. I mean, again, it probably makes sense. I'd be signing him down to as long a contract as I could, probably. I think he's 26, so 3 years or something like that feels like it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that, again, I hope these players aren't signed for us to then get to next summer and ever decide, right, we need to upgrade Ole Gunnar now, because just giving these type players sort of time to breathe in the team, you see how much better they get. He's been so consistent. And to be honest, I knew he was an attacking fullback. I knew that's what he'd want to do from time at Fulham and at Torino, but I didn't know he was quite as solid defensively. And he also, and this is important given everything we've talked about today, he also seems like one of those dressing room guys who basically leads it in terms of, all like the match pass stuff and the post match videos. He's always there, like front and center with a massive smile on his face, leading the chants. And like people in dressing rooms remember that. It's important. Those sort of players become your mate. And if your mate then gets rewarded for a good form with a decent contract, it makes you feel good as well.
One of the reasons I asked you about the 25-man squad thing was just to see if it was indicative of overperformance within the team. And I think it probably is, which lends a question as to whether it's sustainable. That's something we discussed on Monday. I mean, I do think it is actually, that we can maintain, not like European challenge necessarily, or, but I do think top 10 feels sustainable now. How do you view it?
Yeah, I mean, the only question is when a dip comes, which at some point it clearly has to. And Forest have been right since, well, I say right since, for most of my lifetime, but let's concentrate on the last 2 years. They have had this ability to get themselves in little ruts where you can't quite work out where the next win's coming from, whether that's at home or away or both. And there will be a lull at some point. But no, I mean, in terms of the way they're playing, it does feel sustainable. The only slight doubt I've always had is their ability to break down teams at home and to get the wingers involved doing that, which I think they found really hard with both Hudson-Odoi and particularly Elanga when there's no space to run into. So that's the next challenge. But then if you've got Anderson performing without Morgan GibbsWhite in the team, you've got Morgan to come back, and you've got you've got Sosa and Jota to kind of unpick locks. There is a different way of doing that, and I think we'll probably see it over the next few games at home. But yeah, I think it is fairly sustainable. I think if Forest finished 12th, the kind of my overriding thought, and it's not in any way negative, but if Forest are 8th in January and finish 12th or 13th, I hope everybody remembers that that's still a hell of an achievement for the season as a whole, because we're all guilty of getting carried away, because that's the joy of it, right? But if if we lose 6 of our last 10 games and slump to 12th in the league, that's absolutely fine, given, we were 4th favourites with the bookies to go down at the start of the season. Whether you agree with that or not, they generally know what they're talking about in terms of predictions, because that's how they make their money. So we were 4th favourites to go down, and I think we're now 12th favourites to go down. So in the space of 2.5 months, we've completely changed the game. So even if it slumps back, it's still been a fantastic campaign.
I was just looking at upcoming fixtures. I'm a massive believer in fixtures breeding form, more than other people, I think. So I do think the next 4 games are really good for us. West Ham, Newcastle, Ipswich at home, obviously Arsenal away. That Arsenal away is sort of the start of a tougher run if you overlap it slightly. We've got Man City away, Man United away with their new manager in place potentially, Villa at home, Brentford away, Tottenham at home. So you're going up to Boxing Day. That's a tougher run, and probably is that where we probably need the calm heads and cool thoughts to prevail in a way.
Yeah, and I think that's when, those are the principles that Nuno basically bestows in his own personality. So I think we will have that composure internally. We just all got to make sure we stick on the same page as supporters as well. I do also think, going back to what we said about Liverpool away and Chelsea away and Brighton away, I do think to an extent Forest the style of play, the intention away from home is slightly fixture proof. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to go away to Arsenal, Manchester City and get anything, but I don't think we're necessarily going to play any differently. We've seen, for example, I watched Fulham at Manchester City and they were able to get at them. The joy for me in that is not thinking we're definitely going to get a point. It's thinking that there's a chance, because, I thought it would be 5 years before I watched Forest in the Premier League go to one of those top 2 or 3 clubs away from home and genuinely believe like we could compete. Now, we won't do that over the whole course of a whole season, but we've shown at Anfield that we've got the ability to do that over a 90-minute period. So just not having those games where you write them off and think, well, we all do it. You look at fixtures and think, well, we'll lose that one, probably lose that one. I don't think there's a reason to do that anymore, and that's positive in itself.
The last kind of super big question I wanted to touch on with you is, because you're doing this 92 clubs thing, you're looking at the way clubs are run, the structure, the long-term stability. Obviously, things are really good at Forest at the moment. I think they've had 2 or 3 good transfer windows, actually. Do you feel like the building blocks are in place for us to establish ourselves as a Premier League club for the long term? I know you're only ever 1 bad season away from disaster, but do you see the thinking in place now?
Yeah, I'll kind of answer that backwards. The ambition has always been there. We know that. The question was whether ambition at Forest too readily became equated with impatience, not just from owner, but from other people as well. I think we have got closer to a situation where people in important positions see that ambition can go hand in hand with letting people get on with things, with delegation, with buying players for the future and then giving them 2-3 windows and giving them time in the team, not having to rip it up at the end of every season. And for ambition doesn't mean signing players who everybody's heard of and therefore they're going to be really good. I think most clever clubs go about things different way now, certainly those outside the financial elite. PSR makes things really hard. But if you look at Brighton, which is a club that they've always talked about in terms of wanting to mirror, they do it because they're always a year ahead. I think Forest are not a year ahead yet. I think they nailed the transfer window they needed to have for this season, and it's really helped them. It's helped them far more than I thought it would, but it's really helped them. The question is whether we can now start to, with the times we make, build for 2-3 years down the line, because that's how you make it sustainable. That's how you avoid that 1 bad year and you go. You look at clubs who fell out the Premier League doing that. I've just been to Stoke. Like Stoke's the obvious example. They were a club that were kind of living season 0 every time. So they did really well doing it, and then when it stopped working, it completely fell away. Forest need to get themselves in a position where that doesn't happen. But they've earned our trust to do that. They really have with what's happened over the last year. I have been very critical of the kind of mania and circus behind the scenes, and I don't think it's completely gone when you look at some of the charges recently, including the owner and stuff. But certainly in terms of transfers and recruitment and having a manager who's on kind of aligned with all of that and them aligned with him is such a massive advantage. It really is. So yeah, long may it continue.
Yeah, I think the thing that gives me encouragement around that is some of the signings that aren't the stars now, like Morera is a probably signing for 2 years' time.
Yeah.
Sosa's a signing for. I know he's playing this year, but he looks like a signing for next year. I don't mean that
Mm.
disrespectfully to him, but he's behind Hudson-Odoi right now, but you can see the talents there. So it does give me optimism, certainly, and hopefully it's not a flash in the pan.
The
Because
other thing to say is that clubs, other clubs are able to do this. Brighton, again, the obvious example, because they sell players for huge amounts of money. And I think Forest, the one thing that I've not mentioned about the summer gone is that I know that it was done for PSR reasons, but Forest were sold players for big fees. They haven't done that really before. Brennan was the first, and even that was kind of PSR related. What we need to get better at is selling to buy, and selling again, like selling a year in advance, and not selling because, oh my God, there's a deadline, or selling because we want to spend 40-50 million pound more this summer. It's kind of selling in advance and seeing selling as a sign of strength, not necessarily as a weakness. That's something that doesn't initially, I can't imagine Evangelos Marinakis, I can see him having to be persuaded of that. If someone says, right, we've now got an offer of 60 million from Rio, brilliant, we sell him, it's fine. It's not don't act like, oh no, Forest are selling their best players, this is awful. That's how you do it. Like, you buy players low, you develop them, you sell players high, you wish them well, and you applaud them when they come back because your club's better anyway. That's the way to do it.
We did see a touch of it with Elanga, didn't we, on deadline day, and they didn't sell.
Yeah.
And I can see why they didn't sell, because it was deadline day. But in the summer, are we going to have to get used to that as fans, that probably Murillo's going to go, but we've got Morato, who looks a good player, hopefully waiting in the wings.
Yeah, and you hope that in a couple of years' time, then the summer, the winter before, like you've just said with Solskjaer and Jota, you hope that the next cab off the rank is already there, itching to push in. Ideally, was already providing competition for places anyway. That's the dream. And yeah, we did see it with Elanga. I would have, I think, again, in hindsight, I think I would have sold at the time for the price. I know that it was, pretty bad timing. And again, I think that plays into what I've just said. I think it would have been seen or portrayed as a sign of weakness. Oh, Forest are a selling club because they've sold Elanga. But if you get the highest value you ever think you're going to get for a player, and you also have another player in that position because you bought two of them in the summer just gone, that's okay. Like, it's all right to do that. That's the next stage for Forest. But that's not critical. It takes some clubs a decade to get there. Forest have only been in the Premier League for 2 and a bit years.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I said at the time I wouldn't have sold Elanga because it was deadline day. If I'd known Jota Silva was going to be, it looks like a really good player, then I probably would have done. But that's that's going back. But yeah, I think come the summer, we'll probably lose one of them. I mean, again, getting ahead of ourselves. But do you kind of think now that maybe Murillo goes, but actually we could probably keep Morgan now if we're growing as a club? Are we at that stage of our development or not?
Well, not PSR notwithstanding, and I hope that there's no need to sell anyone before June the 30th on the basis that they were prepared to buy a striker, it seems, in the final days of the window, and that didn't happen. We are in, I think that's probably the one position in the team where we are in that situation where we've got the power. We've already got Elliot Anderson stepping up. He's performed in the 10. He can play elsewhere, but he can do that job. So suddenly it's less scary. So if a bid comes in for Morgan Gibbs-White and it's 50 million and we think he's worth 65, we can hold out for it because we don't need to sell. If the 65 doesn't come, we can hope that he's still happy because ideally we're playing top half football and we're keeping him happy and he's in the England squad. And if we get the 65 million, we say, we loved having you, Morgan. Thanks very much. You go on and play in the Champions League and, get 50 caps for England, and we will back Elliot Anderson to replace you and do the same, and we'll buy his replacement. So this is how it works. It can feel quite transactional at times, I think, for supporters to get used to that there's a conveyor belt there, because I love Morgan Gibbs-White dearly, but that's how it will eventually have to work. Yes, especially in a PSR era. But we shouldn't be scared of it. If you'd have said to me 3 months ago, Morgan Gibbs-White's going to be out for 2 games and they're massive and it's Palace at home and Leicester away, I'd have been ridden with nerves. And we've just seen Elliot Anderson lead the team in terms of progressive carrying, in terms of chance creation, in terms of dribbling, in Morgan's absence, which is joyous.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. The only thing I was thinking there is it's a bit of a shame for younger fans and kids, because when we were growing up, you'd have the one club man that you would love, and you get the shirt on your back. Yates is probably the only exception now.
Say, they'll be able to go and hang their stars on the Ryan Yates statue. Don't worry about them.
True. Right. The last topic I wanted to discuss briefly. This is the first show we've done since Forest were fined again by the FA. This time at 125,000 for the touchline melee with Chelsea. They got a much lower fine. I think it was 25,000. I should have written that down. The report basically said that Forest showed no contrition. They admitted their part, but they didn't really take the blame. It said there's been no evidence put forward to address what is now becoming, they say, a serial problem. I think this is the fifth time this has happened in the last 3 seasons or something, that we've been charged with not controlling players. 6 incidents within the previous 5 seasons, and the second non-standard charge within 12 months. So they could have fined a fine of 150,000. They'd reduced it to 125,000 because Forest admitted their part. I looked at the fair play table. This isn't a direct correlation, but we're 13th in it and Chelsea are 19th. So it doesn't feel to me like Forest have a disciplinary problem, but they've had a few of these charges now, obviously. Dan, what's your general thoughts on this one, and then ask you about the others?
I mean, the melee itself, I don't really have a problem with. It felt like slightly aggravated handbags. I also think it's an important ingredient of particularly the way we play away from home, and particularly against big clubs, that we're going to try and get in their face. My favourite bit of the season is going on Twitter after Forest have won away from home and seeing away fans scream about Ryan Yates. Like that's now a legitimate pastime, right? And then part of that is about an aggression, is about protecting our own, it's about standing up for ourselves, and it's about ruffling feathers. And I don't think the club will ever internally say that should change. My issue, the thing that kind of sticks in my throat, is the way that the club is still quite bad at, a charge lands and it's kind of all barriers go up, and we've done nothing wrong, and it's not all our fault, and we feel victimized. And it all goes back to me still, sadly, to that kind of Clattenburg stuff. And obviously the recent charge with Marinakis approaching the referee. And I don't like it, I have to say. And there'll be fans who will scream and say, like he's just protecting the club's name, and he's standing up, he's being a leader. And I love to see that. But at a point in time, you have to take a step back from that. And I think that time came a while ago, and I hope it kind of comes now, because the fines are certainly racking up. We're getting towards the 7-figure mark, which is pretty impressive.
I agree. I think this one was a bit overblown, really. I think it all started because Cucurella rolled into Maresca. And then when that happens, Chelsea players obviously going to kick off and defend their manager. Forest players obviously going to have to defend Nico Williams. I don't think it was the worst foul, to be honest. I think it was a circumstantial thing, and it got out of hand. Forest fans will, say about Nicholas Jackson giving Morato a slap and getting away with it. So I feel like this one was overblown. The wider point I do agree with is there's a culture of never back down, which probably stems from the ownership. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because it's good because it instills that mentality that you kind of want to see. But it also means you're probably going to get in trouble a fair few times. And I think they've riled up the Premier League a lot now, to the point I think that they probably do quite enjoy throwing the book at us as much as they can now, I would say.
Well, if your manager's been banned for 3 games from the touchline and your owner's been banned from the stadium for 5 games, you're getting towards, at that point, serious punishments. And I mean, I don't just mean like fines that are annoying. So it'll have to change at some point, partly because I assume Evangelos Marinakis wants to go and watch Forest from time to time, and he's not been able to do that recently. And also because although we've won the 2 games when Nuno's been in the stand and he is able to talk to the team at half time and stuff, he would much rather be on the touchline doing the micromanaging himself. Of course he would. So I think Nuno, my political answer is I think Nuno is probably more likely to learn quicker than maybe the owner, because he is incredibly passionate and he is fired up, and he reacts when he is perceived that he's been wronged, and he's going to have to cut that out, because or he will, if it happens again, then 5 games will be increased, because it's the same thing. It's the serial problem stuff, and they don't want to see it. We know that. I've been to Athens Derby in Greece, and I've been to other games in Greek football, and yeah, it's spicy. There's a slightly different culture maybe there, in terms of everybody piling onto the pitch at the end, and it's not pleasant. And the English FA and the Premier League will absolutely not stand for that element of it happening here. So he's going to have to watch himself.
Yeah, he's there aren't owners like him now. I know Forest fans love him generally. Some fans don't like. He's quite animated. There's not many Ken Bates, Sam Hamans left in the game now. He doesn't nearly fit the corporate style of the Premier League, I would say, and I think they probably much prefer an owner to be a bit quieter. But there's certainly wider issues with Premier League ownership when you look at actually who owns the football clubs.
Yeah.
I would say as a bigger picture, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. State ownership is a bigger deal than owners having a pop at referees, but it's the kind of optics of it. It's the PR of it. It looks pretty bad when an owner is storming off the pitch, and obviously you read we talk about not backing down, and you read some of the verdicts from that case, and it's farcical, really. And it doesn't put the club in a bad light, because that's too much, and that's just kind of me kind of wringing my hands and being too taking everything too seriously. But it's silly, really, because it's not necessary. Nothing's going to change by doing that. You won't improve anything. All you do is get managers and owners stadium bans, and they will only increase if it carries on. So one thing we've shown is that Forest are perfectly capable of handling themselves on the pitch. The players are capable of doing that. There's a steelness within them that is really important now, and I think they could be left to be getting on to do that themselves.
Let's finish on an on-pitch note then. I remember, I think a week or so ago, Temps was saying, we could have 6 points from 2 games against Leicester and who else we played? I can't remember. Oh, Palace. And it sort of opens doors. 2 more games for the international break. Is it mental to think we could have 4 wins in a row in the Premier League? And that really opens a lot of doors in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's clearly not unthinkable. West Ham have struggled this season, albeit won their last game. Newcastle are a very good team, albeit lost their last game and slightly out of form. It's not unthinkable. I try to go into these games. These are exactly the sort of games where when you go up to the Premier League, you think, hang on, we've got a chance in this game. And then you lose the game 2-0 and you think, well, that's really annoying. That's a really poor result. And you think, well, no, actually, Newcastle are owned by Saudi Arabia and have massive budgets, and for all their PSR limitations, have a very good squad of players, particularly in the final third. West Ham has spent £1 billion in the summer, have got a new manager. Again, their midfield, it's great that Mohamed Kudus is not going to be there, but again, the midfield is really strong if they get it organised. We've got a chance to beat both. I would snap your hand off for 4 points. And even if we draw both games, that's not bad. That's still moving forward in the right direction. That's still getting to the November international break, having lost 1 match.
Yeah, I think 2 draws, 3 points, anything like that is fine with me. I think we can win both, but I like you say, I don't expect us to win both, but to feel like we can win both is pretty nice. Yeah. Certainly not having desperation around, can we scrape enough wins together to just stay up is certainly a nice feeling. Right, if you have enjoyed that, do us a favor, hit like on the video, do subscribe. You can become a channel member, leave us that lovely review on iTunes and Spotify. I do read them all. Tell us a bit about what you've got coming up. Any other work you want to plug and where people can find you?
Yeah, just relentlessly ploughing on with going to see 92 clubs in a single season. So it's Millwall on Sunday, and then I think we've then got Blackburn, Crawley, Huddersfield, glamour ties everywhere. So I'm sort of slightly missing out on this Forest season, but it's a good luck charm, so I'll stay away for now.
How are you picking the order of these clubs?
Via the most insane spreadsheet you've ever seen, and I'm praying for no bad weather in January. Otherwise, it's double measures from then on.
Oh yeah, you want to get all the clubs that flood out of the way as quickly as you
Yeah,
can, and
correct.
say do the Premier League clubs in December and January. Yeah, that's what I would say certainly. Right, thank you very much to Dan for his time. We shall be back tomorrow with our West Ham preview, Friday with an opposition preview, and then Saturday with a post-match show, which Lewis is going to be back on. Really enjoyed his contribution last time, so hopefully see you tomorrow. But if we don't, we shall see you soon.